Okay, so today is Thursday, March 18th, 2015, GDP 110. Okay. All right, so I thought spring break was next week, and I was wrong. It's actually it's the following week. So I opened up the next 2 weeks so you guys can see our assignment for next week, and you can see when spring break is. So I was trying to give you guys no homework on spring break, but since I scheduled everything wrong, it's not working that way. So now you have homework.
So we have an assignment due next week.
Yes, you're gonna have the assignment that we. No, you're not gonna have an assignment due next week.
It's gonna be due over break.
Yes. Exactly. So it'll be due the Thursday that we're not here, so we won't do our normal critique. It just I messed it all up.
So
My
we don't
bad.
have to print it, just upload it.
Just upload it, yeah. And it will be the figure ground letter forms that you guys are getting tonight. So I think what I'm going to do is actually open up a forum, and here, I'll edit this one. We'll call this letter forms. And then you guys can actually upload your letter forms to this forum. Okay, great. So we won't be here, but then at least we can see what everyone's been doing, and we can take the time to look at that. There we go. Okay, so you guys see that? So the week of spring break, you're gonna upload you're gonna turn in your normal letter forms module, but then you're also gonna upload your favorite letter forms. Maybe if you're gonna have like one or two, you can upload them here for the whole class to see. Okay? So we'll get into that in 1 second. I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about type. So as the semester has been going on, we've talked a little bit about typography. We had the extra credit assignment on Saturday where you guys learned how to pair different typefaces together, which I think was a really good lesson. I wish they would have kept going because found it really cool. They gave us different general rules for when you're pairing different typefaces together. One of them was, try to pair a serif with a sans serif, like Lydia was saying. Don't pair two different serifs. And also the idea of trying to pair type outside of the font family. So your font family is when you have a bunch of different type options for one different font. And we've talked about this in class, but let me show you. Yes, John?
I have an entry in the index on font pairings.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Good to know. So this is a font family, Minion Pro, and these are all the different versions. So what the presenter basically said is you wouldn't pair two people together in your own family, right? You wouldn't pair sisters and cousins and brothers. So try to think outside of your normal font families when you're pairing fonts.
Except in West Virginia.
Except, I would say a little bit further south. Okay. So we've talked about this in this class. We have two main categories of type. Okay, you have your display type. So when you think display type, think headlines, signage, big bold type. Usually it's a single word or a short sentence. Okay, you think about a newspaper, you have a headline. It's the title of the piece is going to draw you in. Okay, and then you have your text type, or what I refer to it most often as is body copy. So that's the mass of text that makes up your story or your article or the information in your poster or whatever it is you're working on. So there's different classifications of type. You have your serif type, which we've gone over. So what's serif type? Raise your hand. Marco, what's serif type?
The letters have, I don't know how to describe it, but
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah, like a little tag at the end, right? And then a sans serif. No serif. Right. Exactly. So when you think of serif type, kind of how it originated was that think of how like in Roman times they used to like chisel type into stone. So you'd have a chisel and you kind of chisel it in, and so the serifs would kind of emerge from there. And you had like a punch that would do it. So it would kind of create the serif look. So those small little feet that are, or tags that are on the type, when you have a large area of copy that's written out, they actually help guide your eye through to make reading easy. So when you have a serif font, you usually see that in a book. Oftentimes you'll see a sans serif font used online because the serifs don't translate as well on a screen. So that's why, yes, John?
Didn't used to.
They didn't used to translate as well, but now everything's high def, retina, burn your eyes out. Poor Beyonce can't have a zit and get away with it anymore. Okay, so sans serif without the serifs, okay? During the early part of the 20th century, that's when they were kind of refined, and they kind of have a more modern, sleek look. Yeah? And then you have a script font, and a script font, you know, think of like a cursive style font or more of like a handwritten style of font, and those are kind of designed like for when you think of like good old school penmanship or calligraphy. Nowadays, there's this huge boom in handwritten fonts. You guys, if you guys are online on Pinterest or if you look on Instagram, you know, you can follow people that are doing some really, really badass stuff with handwritten font. It's really kind of like the rage right now. Yeah, Liam.
What do you mean by handwritten font?
Like literally, like so instead of thinking of it as like a computer font, think of it as type that's like handwritten. So like calligraphy, or like a style of type where like people are just, it's all hand drawn and then probably digitally manipulated.
So they like create their own font with Illustrator, or they draw it and scan it in?
They draw it and scan it in, and then they can create a font with it.
That's so cool.
This is a cool Instagram that I like to follow. It's called Good Type. So they just, it's kind of like a curation of all handwritten fonts or type. Okay. So you can see there's a bunch of different ways. Like here we have, this is just ink on paper, right? You can see, but it's beautifully done. Okay. And then this is also hand done, but it also looks like it was kind of manipulated a little bit in a digital way, probably a little bit of Photoshop to help clean it up. And it's quite a science, because when people think about letter forms, they're thinking about proportion and scale, all the things we talk about. So when it comes to typography, it's all of the stuff that we talk about: balance, color, value, texture, but they're applying it to just letter forms instead of you know, a regular format or a full piece. So there's some really cool stuff. And so then some people will then turn their handwritten stuff into actual fonts. So let me show you, for instance. You guys have all been on DaFont, right? Or most of you have. It's a free, you can download free fonts. So they have a category here for handwritten, and people basically develop these by probably hand drawing them, scanning them, and then using a font program to put them together. I've actually never created a font. It's on my bucket list. I should probably think about doing that because it's a fun thing to do. I like to play around with a little bit of like hand lettering, more of like a calligraphy style. Here's a friend of mine that lives in town. She does beautiful stuff. She does all hand lettering and like illustration work, and so she'll do a lot of stuff like this for wedding invitations. Let's see if she has a better one. Anyway, people pay money. So then this, in this case, she hand lettered it, scanned it in Illustrator, and then turned it into a blank letterpress. Okay, it's called a blind emboss. There's no ink, but it's just imprinted. So that's what I mean by hand lettered. So there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do.
What's the scale they make these letters in? Do they make them really large, like 1 letter per 8 by 11 page or something, or is it just kind of like?
So like this is like primarily like this kind of stuff she's just doing to scale. She's doing this invitation probably all to scale on like the size of a 5x7 or whatever this invitation would be. The majority of the stuff for like that good type, it really just depends on what they're creating it in. So you can create something that's smaller, say like a little tiny thing here where you can see like the scale of the pen to the actual typography itself. You can scan something in at a high resolution. So what is the resolution that we always want to use for print or strive to use? 300, right. So sometimes on scanners, you actually have the ability to scan at a higher resolution. So you can scan at a resolution, say, at 600 or 1200, if that's an option. And then you can actually make it bigger than the original because you've scanned it with as much information as possible to make it a little bit larger. So that's always something that you can do. But you guys can follow this Instagram, and then there's always like a ton. There's some really cool stuff. I mean, like this is just like bonkers. Like that's gold ink on black paper. It's just like so fun. And these are people who have been practicing forever, you know. Here's someone else I really like. Jessica Hage. Oh, here we go. So she is a graphic designer and illustrator that's well known. She talks all over the country. But what is one of the things that she does that I love? She does this thing called drop caps. Is this it? No. Anyway, she's known for her like super awesome typography. Like she does really cool stuff. So she has this whole thing called like a drop cap. Let's see if I can find it. Do you guys know what a drop cap is? So like if you see like in type, when you have like this right here, see how this D like drops down into the copy? That's a drop cap. So she did a daily drop cap where every day she would do a different drop cap in a different style and just went out and started hand lettering it. So most of the stuff, she works a lot in Illustrator, so she'll hand letter it and then take it into Illustrator and go from there. Yes, John?
Back in the old days, if you wanted a one-off poster, you'd go to a sign shop, and the sign painter would make what's called a show card.
Mm-hmm.
And he would hand letter the card with brushes, different kinds of brushes. And the absolute king of show card writing was a guy named Mike Stevens, and you can look him up on the net.
Let's see. Like that?
Mike Stevens signs.
Oh yeah, here's some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
He wrote some books on hand lettering in which he analyzed the positive and negative aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, so a lot of times when we think about typography, you have to think about the positive and negative space, right? Because you want your type to be readable, and it's an opportunity for you to, let's go back to that one. Let's say add good type. To really think about design and proportion and scale in a holistic way with something really simple as like an everyday letter form. So most fonts that we find online, like the classics, like if you think like Helvetica, those have all been designed with proportion in mind and how the letter forms work together. So always think about how what's happening inside of the letter form as well as the actual letter form itself. So all of this interesting information that's happening, like how this circle is broken up by this little tiny tail in here, or and this one lucky, like how the C doesn't close all the way because we want to make sure it still has readability, but how this kind of shape of this negative space in here is really nice proportionally and it has a good look to it, okay? Those kind of things. So I'm talking about it now because I want you guys to start thinking about that for this next assignment. Anyway, I like type. I'm kind of a type nerd. Get into it. Okay, so the designer's task when you're using type. Your job for whatever you're designing is to communicate to the audience the message that is contained within the text, okay? So if you are doing a layout for a story, okay, what you want to do is you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is elevating and continuing that message through and through. So you want to advance, enhance, extend, organize, and articulate the language of the story. That is your job as a designer. You don't just slap it down and say, okay, that's it. There's a lot going on there. You have to both take out information that's in the story and make it readable. You have to add to it and enhance it with visuals or how it's laid out. But you also have to make sure it's readable, right? That's the whole point. If you can't even read this, whatever it is that you're doing, it defeats the purpose. So this is legibility is of paramount importance when you're doing typography. And readability. So you want to make sure that the point size is a size that is readable. It's not too big, it's not too large. If you have a headline, you want the headline to be bold enough that visual hierarchy is there and that it's the first thing you look at. But if you have your headline too small, then that kind of defeats the purpose, right? So you have to think about the appropriate use of your typography as well. If you have the lines of type too close together, that makes it harder to read. If you have the words or individual letter forms too close together, or the words too close together, that makes it hard to read. And if you have too much copy on one page, not enough breathability, not enough negative space around, that makes it hard to read. How many of you guys have textbooks that are just solid text with no pull-out quotes, no little quotes floating around, no images, and you're like, right? It's heavy, it's daunting. You want to make it readable, you want to make it easy to digest. Okay, so also think about the arrangement of the information when you're playing around with typography. So the arrangement can be visually pleasing, okay? It can create a little bit of tension, but you really want it to convey that specific message that you were going after in the beginning. So I know last week I gave you guys a little bit of shit about how the typography was used in some of the posters, right? Because it was kind of an afterthought. But here's an example of a poster that is visually very interesting. You can still read what's happening, but then it also is only made out of type. So type doesn't have to be an afterthought. It can be the whole entire design, and it can still be beautifully designed. It can still communicate the message, and it doesn't have to be boring. Okay. So some quick rules of type. And our next assignment is positive, negative letter forms, where you guys are going to actually look at the letter forms as shapes. And then after that, you're going to have an assignment where you get a 2-page layout, which is going to be more about laying out an actual 2-page spread of copy. So some things to think about when you're using type. So a common mistake among young designers is to think that quirky novelty type equals creativity. Okay? So one of the classic typefaces that people make fun of is Comic Sans. Have you guys heard of Comic Sans before? And why do you guys know why everyone makes fun of Comic Sans?
Well, I've not seen it.
Because it's so overused.
It's overused, and it's overused in inappropriate ways. So it's kind of a funny comic font. It makes sense for a comic book, but what it doesn't make sense for is when it's used, say, for a lawyer's document, right? Or a sign for a doctor's office or something that's maybe a little bit more appropriate. So
Look at all those logos. Those are hilarious.
I know, which ones should I go back? Oh,
Chanel.
these. What if everything was made with Comic Sans? Right. And it's just it's everywhere. As you guys start to play around with more type, you'll start to see and recognize. Another typeface that gets a lot of shit is papyrus.
Happy Roots.
Oh no. Not actual papyrus, right? We've all seen this. Avatar used it, and I had a heart attack. But you have to think though, it is a little bit fitting for Avatar, right? It kind of is fitting. So.
Can you zoom it?
Mm-hmm.
I think it looks good though. There.
Yeah, I mean it's fitting, but it just was literally hilarious that that's what they used because everyone in the design world is like having a fit. Like this is like the #1 font that like elementary school teachers use on like all of their documents. You know, it's just like it's used all the time, and part of it is because it comes with a lot of programs automatically uploaded in your machine, so then it's easy to use. Okay.
Helvetica used to be the boogeyman.
Helvetica, yeah, totally. But it's such a clean, classic font. So, you know, don't think that novelty is the answer because it's fun. Think about the message, right? I'm drilling this into you guys. What is the purpose of your piece? What is the purpose of the design? Yeah, Liam.
What are you designed to say in Arial?
I think it's fine. Like this type here, this might even be Arial. It's used a lot for body copy on the web because for a long time, web fonts were really limited in what was available. So like Arial is a really common one. I don't know, but like why use Arial when there's so many other beautifully designed fonts available to you? And
I don't know. I think a lot of the fonts that are offered are they just all look kind of cheesy. Like, why not use Arial and like give it a slight slant or something?
oh,
I think that looks way better. Like a slant
why
Arial.
would you apply a slight slant to Arial?
I don't know because it kind of is like a
It has an italic variant.
bold look. Oh wait, no, Arial's not. What is the one without the little?
This
tabs
isn't
at
Arial.
the
I just wrote Arial. Hold on. There's so many different kinds of Arial. Okay, so here's Arial.
Yes.
Okay,
All right, now all capital.
you want me to make it all capital
Has
too?
to be all capital.
Okay.
And now 50 degrees slant.
Okay, so I don't want to do this. This you should never do this. You should never add a 15-degree slant. What you should do, Liam, is you should select the italic version of your font always.
Okay, that's what
It doesn't look the same because what we're doing is we're distorting the font, and you can see where there's slight differences. So look at how this curve here in this distorted font is slightly off now. It kind of puckers up a little bit more. In here, it has much more of a flow to it. Can you guys see that okay? Look at how this kind of has this little swoop now, and this doesn't. Because this has been specifically designed to have that slant, and the proportions are intact. You're not distorting them. Notice how we added a slant here. Look how much more slanted this is, and how this part of the leg of the font looks a little bit thinned out compared to this.
Oh yeah,
That matters.
it does.
Okay.
What if we slant the air already?
Oh no, don't do that. But there's so many different options for sans serif. It really comes down to what is it that you're trying to communicate. So let's see.
Another faux pas is squishing it.
Squishing it is a huge no-no.
Well, you can squish it down to about 92% without too much visual
Yeah, but I really don't.
catastrophe, but
So this is Gothic, okay? And you could see how, let's do this. Oops. Liam, I wish you could have come on Saturday night. Hurry up and turn 21. But you can see, so this is Century Gothic. You can see how this has a much more circular curve modern look, okay? So you can see how there would be a difference for different uses for these fonts. Let's find another one.
Wait, what, that's not Arial bold.
No. Just ignore this. Ignore what it says. It's like very confusing, I know.
Really confusing.
Let's see, what else do we have on here? Oh, here, Avenir.
That one's cool.
So you can see how there's slight variation. So there's a lot of really great design fonts that are available, and it really comes down to what is the message you're trying to convey. Okay, these are a very, very modern sans serif where they're all thick and they're kind of like a slab. So you don't really have a lot of changes in thicks and thins across the entire letter form. So let's see if I can find another one that has more of that. So those would be like maybe a more modern looking one. So let's see.
The papyrus font reminds me of like a small restaurant trying to look fancy.
Yeah, because they don't have a designer to help them, and they're waiting for you to come along and support them. You know what I mean? Like they're waiting for the right designer to come to them and be like, "Let me
Instead,
help
they
you."
should just use the slanted aerial. It is better than papyrus.
Oh my god. Let's see.
Just don't use Old English all caps,
Yeah.
unless you're a gangster.
Anyway, so you can see how different fonts have different characteristics, Liam. So that's my point.
Yeah.
So never purposefully distort a font. Never add an angle.
Never do it again.
Don't do that. I
What is
will.
it- Why is it there then?
Because
Why did it
maybe
help?
you want to edit something a little bit. I mean, but the idea is you don't want to do it a lot. So it's like, you know, why that's like saying like, why does your car go to 200 miles per hour? Like it's there as an option, but it doesn't mean that you should do it,
I do.
right?
Sign ordinances oftentimes create real type abortions.
Yeah.
It says
Yeah.
it has to be in 4-inch letters, all caps, and it fits into a certain space, and then you have to squish it.
Yeah.
It becomes illegible.
Yeah. So that's the
but
thing too.
legal.
So like going back to what I was talking about when I got off track was about how when you are starting it off, tricks to avoid to make you look like you're an amateur and you don't know what you're doing. One of them is picking a bunch of foo-foo crappy fonts like Comic Sans or Papyrus or something that's completely ridiculous for the job, right? Or distorting it, adding an angle. The other thing two people would do a lot is they will squish down, like what John was saying, in order to get something to fit. Okay, that is not that. I can tell immediately when a font's been distorted like that.
What are with all those fonts at the way bottom where you click on them and they don't even change the letter? It looks like they're written in like different. Yeah, like these right here. Why do
Oh,
they have-
these are different languages.
Oh,
So you
those are-
so you have different characters, right, for different words. The problem is that we have it set up for English. I don't even have those characters in my keyboard. I don't even know how to bring one up
Mhm.
Or what they mean.
or what they mean. I mean, if you go to your glyphs and you have it selected, you should be able to find all of the different characters available. So
Death to America, Sans.
Anyway, so that's like how you can go into your glyphs. Do you guys know what glyphs are? Have we talked about that in this class? So a glyph panel, if you go to type and you open it up, it basically shows you all of the characters that make up an entire font. So if you need a really specific character, like a little copyright symbol, you would go into the glyphs panel, and that's how you would find it. Another example is, you know, like a little asterisk or like a certain type of, something like with a ligature, which is when you have two different letter forms that are combined. So sometimes when you put an F and an F together, instead of having a break, the system automatically knows to connect two F's together with one bar across and connect it to the L like that. Can you guys see how it's done that? Or an F and a B, how they connect? So that's why a font is more than just the letters. It also knows how to put them together with correct spacing and proportion and stuff.
So if you're just typing and you type one of those symbols, like the @ symbol, will it automatically do it in the same font that you're using? The same as the glyphs? Or do you have
Yeah. So it's all the same. It's all the same font. So this is the same font that we've been using. So that's the @ sign. And then if I were to do the FB, oh wait, maybe this isn't the same. So most of the time it should know if you're gonna have a ligature and have it combined. Where is it? Yes, John.
Those glyphs
Maybe I
also have
changed it.
keyboard shortcuts. Like I know that M dash is
This is the wrong one.
all 0151 on a PC. And they all have
Oh yeah.
shortcuts like
I don't remember any of that. I don't know any of those shortcuts.
You can also, if you don't put a space between two letters or two words, and you just put a dash between them, it'll automatically create an M dash.
It depends on the software.
Oh.
Because in InDesign, it's relying on you as a designer to have more control, so it won't do that. Whereas in like Word, it will. So that's where the difference. Okay. Anyway, so we digress. Let's go back. Where were we? Okay, so don't look, completely amateur. So be careful with the choices that you're making with the fonts, okay? Quirky novelty type is no substitute for well-reasoned conceptual solution to the design problem at hand. So this can go back to what you were saying, Liam, like why isn't Arial okay? Well, maybe Arial would be fine. Maybe Arial is a better option than Comic Sans because you're doing something that's a really simple document that needs to be read well, okay? So that in that case, that could work. So as a general rule, we talked about this. This is from Saturday as well. No more than 2 typefaces should be utilized in a given design. Usually the combination of a serif and a sans serif. If you only give yourself 2 options, it makes it that much easier to control how everything looks. Although there are thousands from which to choose, the fewer you work with, the better you will get to know the intricacies of each one. So pick some fonts that you like. If Arial is your steez, go with it, Liam, okay? Like, just pick something that you want and just get to learn how you would want to use it in the context, okay?
Can I ask why are those pictures there? Like, are those supposed to be bad examples?
I think this is showcasing how typography can be used in different ways. So you can have a mixture of different type. You can use typography graphically without it being actual, like, a body copy. These are also, could be like a little bit just, they're distorted because of the web page. Okay, so here's another fun thing, is you can find type anywhere. So this is a cool series that was done by an artist where they actually found type hidden when looking up at the sky in between buildings. So can you guys see how these like buildings when you're like looking up at the sky in like a big city and how they were cropped and created? Okay.
That is cool.
Mm-hmm. So this goes back to not all type is typeset digitally. Not all type is a font that goes into a program that creates and typesets it that way. In this case, this is all hand created, right? And same here. This is all hand lettered, illustrated. Maybe it could be all done in Illustrator using like a tablet. Okay. So I want you guys to have fun with your typography.
What was that Instagram account called again?
At Good Type. Good Type. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's that lecture. All right, so then next we're going to talk a little bit about logo types. So think of a logo or a logo type as a kind of a brand mark that is using words, okay, like a word mark. So when we think of the word brand, you know how like you have a cow that's literally been branded with a hot iron and it was like with a mark that represented the ranch that it's coming from? That's kind of where that terminology comes from. And with a logo, the term logo actually comes from logo type, which is, you know, Liam.
Sorry. Someone sent me that.
Was that a Snapchat from somebody?
No.
I think you need to come up here and show everybody what.
It's you.
Oh my gosh.
Let's all stare at Liam for like 2 more seconds to make him blush more. Okay. That's his punishment. Okay, so here are examples of logo types. These are logos that are utilizing type to create the logo. Okay. All of these are incorporating positive, negative space in an interesting way. Okay, so you can see how this is kind of creating the illusion of like a moon or an orb. Yes.
So these aren't fonts, these are actual designs.
These are designs, and they could be, they could have been created using fonts. I'm going to show you guys how to do that for your next assignment. How to create an interesting positive, negative space utilizing fonts. Okay. But you can see how you can break stuff apart, and in this case, this negative space here of the jig and saw together, they make a jigsaw puzzle piece. Okay. So, and then the other part of a logo is often the symbol. So you have the logo type, which is the utilizing the words, and then the symbol. So a good example is the Nike logo. Right? So this is the logo type. It's using the typography, and then the swoosh is their mark. Okay, their graphic that goes along with it. So I want you guys to start thinking of the positive negative space and how those things that come together are so important for a design. Even when it's something as simple as playing around with letter forms,
What is that G? That was really cool.
pay attention, dude.
I saw that.
Okay.
And scrolled up and I got nervous.
Okay, yeah, because you snooze, you lose. Okay, so negative space we've talked about in this class. It's referred to as the background or the white space, okay? The positive space is the foreground or the subject. And then, you know, when you think about your figure ground, you think about the subject, whatever's in the foreground, and then you think about the background, okay? So you think about the subject of like the letter itself, but then when you think about the ground, think about what's behind it, that negative space. The eye tends to go straight to the subject, but it can differentiate between those two. So another good example is the FedEx logo, which we were talking about when Irene was here, is that we see FedEx, right? But if you look closely in the negative space, you see this little arrow, which ties in to the idea of a delivery. It's go, go, go with an arrow, okay? Does anybody else have a good positive negative space logo that they can think of? No, no, no. Let's see if we have something here.
Well, I always thought Roxy was cool. It's 2 Quicksilvers.
Oh yeah, that's a good example.
What about the Pro Wings logo?
What logo?
Pro Wings?
Pro means?
Pro Wings, remember the shoes?
Oh, Pro Wings.
I'm just kidding.
Is it not good? You want me to do it?
I want to stand out.
So the shoes I used to get at Payless.
Oh.
Pro.
All right, Caesar's being funny tonight, guys. Let's go with it. Okay, yeah, so here's a good example of like, it's kind of a cool, it's 2 Quicksilver logos put together and it creates a heart shape, okay? All right. So your next assignment is figure ground letter forms. And the idea for this assignment is that you guys are going to use your initials, okay? I want you to use 2 letters, your initials. I have students who decide to do initials for somebody else. I don't want that. You are stuck with your name until you change it legally, and so therefore you are stuck with it in this class and you have to use those initials, okay? Guess what? Designing with a J and a J sucks. It's not easy, so, but too bad, okay? So if I have to do it, then you guys have to stick with your shitty initials too, okay? So same thing as always. You guys are going to start with your sketches. You're going to sketch a lot for this assignment. You're going to work with 2 letters, okay? If you want to do 3, you can. I don't recommend it. All right. Then you're going to start playing around with their positive, negative space, that figuring ground of those letters. And you're going to work with a variety of fonts, and you're going to sketch out and play around with how you're going to pair those together in an interesting format to create interesting positive, negative space. So let me show you an example. So here's some thumbnail sketches that a student did with A and H. And you can see they're just sketching out different versions of how those letters can come together in their sketchbook. Okay. Then after you've sketched and you've done 15 black and white thumbnails, then you move on to the next part, number 2, which is the digital development part. Okay? And you're going to do at least 15 digital studies before you take it and start doing color and choosing the ones you want. Okay, so back down. Sketches, and then these are the digital studies in black and white. Yes, Liam?
Do they all have to be fonts, or can we design a few of them, like in digitally? Can we get these kind of somewhere?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and do that. So this is how I recommend you guys do this project, is that you do exactly what we were kind of doing in InDesign right now, okay? You just take, I would do this in Illustrator actually, hold on. Let me find my file that I have in here. I would work in Illustrator because Illustrator is going to be what you're going to want to do when you start to, after you've done your sketches, you're going to want to work in Illustrator. Okay, so get a text box going and get your initials. Liam, what are your initials? L,
See,
LC.
you just throw a quick slant on that.
I'm ignoring you. Okay, so then you go through and I want you just to select and change the fonts. Try to find some fonts that you like. I want you to choose fonts that aren't super crazy, scripty, foofy fonts. I want you to pick fonts that are going to give you really cool, simple shapes to work with. Because when you start working with fonts that have all kinds of flowing crap, it really is going to distract from the whole point of this, which is the positive negative space. Okay? So pick some stuff that's interesting. Give yourself some, let's see, this one's cool because it's condensed. Let's make this one bold.
This is a good one for that browser font finder. What's that thing called?
Font.
FCL.
Oh no.
It's flipping typical.
Yeah, flipping typical.
Yeah, so if you guys go to flipping typical, remember we talked about this? Flippingtypical.com, and it will pull up almost all of the fonts that are on your machine, and it will show it to you. Okay,
Should
so
pull them all up.
it
only
should,
pulled
but
up like 15 for me.
well, if you can keep loading, you can load more down here.
You'll get them.
So let's see. Oh, here's a good example of a ligature, how the F and the L are connecting there. Okay, so L, C. All right, so then you can start to say, okay, what are the fonts that I like? You can start here, and then start to pull them up here in Illustrator, okay? Then you have kind of a base. So then you can go and you can start sketching. And the format for this assignment is 8 by 10. So I want you to think about that even in your thumbnail sketches. Okay, so think about an 8 by 10. And then kind of look at the fonts and say, okay, like, you know, I'm going to do an L, and I'm going to overlap with the C. And I want you to start thinking about how the, of course I get the pen that sucks, even though there's like new ones. Okay. So you're going to be working in just black and white to start, okay? So maybe I do all of its letters in black and I kind of overlap, and I'm kind of liking how the overlap is looking. Maybe I want to do all black and I come in and I play around with how an L and a C are looking in white. Maybe I want to play around and have my L come all the way to the border of my format and play around with the C up here. Suddenly, the letter forms start to dissipate, and what starts to come forward is more of that negative space. That is what I want you guys to push. I don't want you to think about just creating a logo, because some students tend to do that, and then they end up with something that is really has no focus on that positive negative space. So maybe the C comes all the way to the format, and the L tucks in. You can think too about how where you have space that overlaps, how that positive negative space can be played around with. Feel free to rotate your, let's see, maybe we do our C like this and our L down here. Feel free to play around. I want you to mess and push the positive negative space. I want this positive negative space to be of interest. I also don't want you to distort the letter forms. I don't want you to slant. I don't want you to take a vector point and distort it because you want it to stretch a certain way. I want you to use the simple shapes, and that's why if you work with simple type and not super foofy stuff with all kinds of scripty stuff on it, it will make it easier for you to play around with that positive negative space. All right, so let me show you an example. So all these different sketches. So in this case, the student was probably looking at a font that they liked, a sans serif, a thick slab font with not a lot of thicks and thins, right? And then playing around with how you can incorporate those in interesting ways to mess around with the positive negative space. So connecting the ends and the sides of the letter forms, hiding and overlapping letter forms, so then the negative space kind of showcases that way. Placing smaller and bigger letter forms, playing with proportion and scale. They don't have to be the same size. One letter form can be smaller, one letter form can be bigger. Right? Then the student played around with color ideas. And then you're going to just take it into Illustrator and you're going to start to play around with executing some of these ideas. So you can see here how the K and the A come together. This was an idea that she kind of does up here. Okay? If you start to explore past your sketches, that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. But think about that positive negative space and see how when you work with black and white, you can really start to see how it's easier to impact that without being kind of caught up in the color. So you can see now suddenly like where this kind of connection happens. See how that shape's really kind of interesting. Or this really sharp triangle here. That angle is very cool. Now suddenly with this shape here, you're looking at this cool like half circle curve that's tucked away in the K, and then this kind of little shapes that pop out there. You know, you can nestle in the letter forms and flip-flop black and white and see how that impacts it.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
There is, she's using only one font, right?
And no, she's not.
Different one.
You can use more than one font. So in this case, in each one of these, she's using either one or two fonts because those are your only options, right? So you guys can mess around with that. And she's using uppercase, lowercase. And then after she has those 15 digital replications, then she's going to start to go in and play around with color. That's what I want you guys to do. And you can see how suddenly color impacts that negative space. Now how things look in color completely changes it. In the case of having an A in the yellow here in the edge, look at how much different that suddenly this is not just negative space anymore. It becomes part of the subject. It's part of that figure. And in this case, it's more of the ground. It goes and recesses into the background more. And don't be afraid to play around with the background. So try filling in your background with black and then having all your letters being white.
Sometimes if you throw your letters into perspective, you can get interesting effects that way.
What do you mean?
Throw them into perspective like looking at buildings converging on a
Oh yeah.
focal point.
Well, they're not allowed to distort it though.
Distort the letters.
Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to distort.
Is
So that's-
perspective is distortion?
If you were to actually distort and make like the letter forms be angled to make it work.
Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, if you were gonna like Star Wars style your font, then that would be distorting it.
Okay.
But if you want to play around with perspective some other way, I'm okay with that. Okay. So let's see another example. So some sketches. You can see they played around with white type on like a dark background and vice versa, just to kind of sketch it out. If you have some fonts in front of you to look at while you're sketching, it makes it better. You can see how these bolder, more simple fonts work a lot better for this negative space here than these script fonts. Do you see this what I'm talking about? Suddenly all this negative space, it's like confusing. You don't have as much control. So if you give yourself simple letter forms to work with, the better. Do not do gradients. Okay, I don't want gradients. I don't want texture necessarily. No texture. I don't want you to distort the fonts, and I don't want you to create any other like shape or symbol. Like I don't want you to make like a circle and like put it in necessarily, unless it's like a background like this. Okay. Okay. So you're gonna do 15 black and white sketches. Then you're gonna play around in your digital format, okay, in Illustrator. And then you're gonna go ahead and kind of develop those out into color. And then at the very end, you're gonna have 1 or 2 designs that you love. Those will be full scale, appended to the bottom of your document at 8 by 10. Okay, so let me kind of show you how you guys can start to do this digitally using the Pathfinder tool that Claudia was so kind to share with us today. So what you want to do is take your letter forms, and I'm going to X out of that. I'm going to break them up into separate pieces, okay? And then I'm going to convert them to outlines. Where am I? Oh, here we go. Okay, so now they're vector graphics. So now you can play around with them in different ways. So that already is looking kind of interesting, right? So we're already just kind of messing around with how these can look, playing with scale, proportion. Yes, Liam?
But you don't want us to alter the lettering.
No. But what you can do is you can take your different letter forms and you can use the Pathfinder tool. And in this case, I like the divide tool because what it's going to do is wherever you have an overlap, I'm going to go ahead and select that. And now you can actually go in, use my white arrow, and play around with kind of overlapping that way. Okay? And you can just keep playing around and messing around over and over and over again. So this is one that I did like last semester or something. You can see I just played with a bunch of different items. So this was 2 different J's flip-flopped, and then you're looking at the different positive and negative space. It's very vertical. Connecting 2 K's together, nestling them in one another. You could, kind of layer stuff on top. You can play around with these backgrounds as long as they're like a solid, okay?
Spiral J is awesome.
This one? Yeah, see, and that's all it is 2 intact letter forms that are fairly simple, okay? And just kind of how you can rotate them and put them together. Let me see if I have another one that's in here. Maybe not. No. Okay, so let me take these again. It's helpful if you take and you make yourself like a few selections. Can I do these all at once? There we go. And give yourself some stuff to work with, right? And let's make that white. And then let's kind of create a black background. Oops. Always think about your format for this, okay? Because it's going to be 8 by 10. So you can kind of rough it for your thumbnails. I don't mind that. Let's play around with the divide tool. Maybe where this overlaps, we make that black. Okay. Maybe you actually bring some of the letter form completely off the edge of the format, or let's make it really large here. But I want you guys to think about balance, like what we've been talking about, right? You can rotate, but I don't want you to distort. And always think about that positive, negative space. Like you're kind of creating some interesting stuff in there. You're creating a lot of lines and space that way. Do you guys have any questions about this? Can you see how it can be fun to play around? So push the boundaries of that positive negative space. Like sometimes it's cool when the eye flip-flops and you can't tell if it's looking at the shapes here or it's actually looking at the letter forms. And then when that's all said and done, then you can go in and play around with color. Sound good? All right, cool. So that's it. That's it for tonight. So you guys can work on that assignment if you want, or how many of you guys are going to stay and work on the assignment?